Thanks, Andrew. Okay, so our last speaker tonight is Lee from Gelert Garden Farms. I gotta put this down, so tall people. Lee, did you need a hand with bringing those up, or are you bringing any of those up? So I just want people to know, Lee brought 14 different types of sweet potato slips, and we're gonna sell them at the end. There's a total of 28 plants, 2 of each kind, for $3.50 each, and then that money is going towards the Kinmount Area Food Bank. So please buy some, support the local food bank. And Lee, come on up. We're pretty much ahead of time, folks, which is pretty awesome. It's 12 after 8, so. All right.
Hi, I'm Lee Ridsdale from Gelert Garden Farm. We do open pollinated and heirloom seeds, sweet potatoes, and we also carry organic seed potatoes as well.
Can I trouble you to use the microphone, please? I can't talk very well.
Okay, can you hear me better there?
Yep. That is certainly an improvement, yes.
Okay, that good? Okay. All right. So sweet potatoes can be grown up here. They just need a little bit of help. As they're a semi-tropical plant to start with from South America. There is a fair difference between them and regular potatoes. With the sweet potatoes, you can eat the whole plant, leaves, vine, everything. And they're part of the morning glory family rather than the nightshade family, which potatoes are. Also, they won't turn green like your regular potatoes if they're exposed to the sun. They store very well. You don't need any special way of storing them. So if you have sweet potatoes and squash, you've got a pretty good thing that'll keep for years. Like I've got some sweet potatoes that are from 2 years ago harvest that are still solid and good. Biggest thing with them is they will not take cold. You got to if you get below 10 degrees Celsius with them, you're going to start to get cold damage. So if you're going to store them, keep them at least 15 degrees Celsius or better, like room temperature is good. A closet, keep cold, or keep not too cold, but dark. It'll help keep them from sprouting when it starts to warm up and stuff. The sweet potato, you can eat the leaves, and there's lots of recipes for leaves and stuff as well. You can eat them as salads, or you can batter them and do all kinds of different things. Tons of recipes on the internet. The way I grow them up here works for me. It might not work for everybody, but I basically 2 ways you can do it. If you need full sun, no matter what you do. They got to be in full sun, or you won't get production. Well, you'll get vine, but you won't likely get any of the potatoes. So you want to have them in full sun. The easiest way to do it is if you use like a 5-gallon size planter or bigger. Like a half barrel will take 3 or 4 plants. And then you can just dump them out and harvest them that way instead of having to dig them. Or if you're going to do larger amounts, what I do is do like about a 2-foot wide base and about 1 foot on the top and about 1 foot high, and cover it with like a roll, and then cover it with clear plastic. And that clear plastic, you got to keep it as tight to the ground as you can, and that'll increase your soil temperature like crazy. So you put that on the one day, and if you got sun, you put your hand in there the next day, and it's really hot. And the sweet potatoes really love it being hot. If you try and plant them too early and it's too cold, they're not going to do anything. Usually at least the 1st of June to plant them. And sometimes it's the 1st of July we get a cool year. They just sit there and do nothing anyway. There's thousands of varieties of them. You can get orange, white ones, yellow ones, purple, red, all different colors, and then oops, I got off on the wrong track here. Anyway, back to looking after them. They're planted from slips rather than the potato. If you try and plant a sweet potato, you'll get a whole bunch of slips and they'll just compete with each other and you won't get anything other than vines. So the slip that comes off the potato gets planted and that will grow into a plant and produce your sweet potatoes. And then you plant them about, well, it depends if you want, how much space you've got, I guess, is the best way to put it. You can plant them as close as a foot apart. If you've got a raised bed and you're trying to get as many in as possible, do them in a staggered pattern and like a foot apart or so. But in the row, I put them usually about 16 inches apart, and they usually do fairly well that way. But if there's any shadow from anything like trees or building or anything, any part of the day that hits that row or plant, you're gonna just get vine, and you'll see a noticeable, as soon as you hit that spot where the shadow starts, you're gonna notice that you've got sweet potatoes here, and then you got very little after that where it's shaded. So your soil's got to be warm, and then keep the weeds out of them as well. They don't do well with weeds. They once they get established and the vines start running, they'll keep the weeds down, but they won't compete well with weeds. And then if you've got a dock or a deck that catches a lot of sun, docks are really good. You can put your planters right on the dock and then just scoop water out of the pond or the lake or whatever and water them, and that gives them the full sun. They do well there. If you're planting them in the field or a garden, if you've got a slight slope to the south, that'll help too, because it keeps them warmer, and they do well that way. Clear plastic works the best, but you will get weeds growing underneath it as well, so you'll have to sometimes lift the plastic and take the weeds out. The other thing you want to do is make sure the plastic's down tight and you've got either sandbags or soil or whatever holding it down so the wind doesn't get under it and pick it up and flap it around, and it'll break all your plants off. Black plastic will work. It doesn't seem to generate the heat as well. But it does keep the weeds down. Okay, trying to cut this down from what I usually do. So yeah, you want to make sure your plants are hard enough, the slips are hard enough before you put them out. You can keep the slips in water until they're ready to go out, but you can also plant them up like a tomato. And the biggest thing is if you plant them in a pot and you don't leave them in that pot too long, because the roots will start to go in circles and get really root bound, and then you'll get really weird shaped sweet potatoes. So those ones back there that I brought should be transferred into a bigger pot, because it's a little ways from June, so they'll grow fairly quickly. don't use if you're keeping slips in water. Don't use chlorinated or treated water. That's a good way to kill them. And then your sweet potatoes will probably about the end of July really start to really go and vine, and they'll be all over the place. If you if they get onto a ground that's not covered with mulch or the plastic, you don't want them to root in that ground, because then they're gonna, instead of just concentrating under the plant, they'll be trying to develop sweet potatoes wherever they hit the ground and start to root. So you can just pick the vine up and throw it back on the plastic or on the mulch or whatever. And then they'll bulk up really well starting late August or early September. So if you can avoid that first early frost that we usually get, by covering the plants and get them through, usually you get another 3 to 4 weeks where they really bulk up well. And they, as long as the soil temperature stays above 10 degrees Celsius, you're good. If the plants get killed off by frost, because as soon as it gets down around 0, they're gonna just curl up and go black. As soon as it does that, you should start digging them, get them out of the ground. If you can get them past that first frost, as long as your soil temperature stays up, you're okay to leave them in. But definitely want to get them out as soon as it starts to cool off. And then after you get them out, you want to very gently dig them up and handle them. They're not like potatoes. They have very thin skin, and they'll mark and bruise really easily. And any of that damage will be, as they're kept, will be just get worse. You got to try and cure them a bit with the high temperature, and for a week or so, 27-30 degrees Celsius, and that'll toughen the skins up and dry them out. So if you put them on some racks, if you got very many of them, put them on some racks or something, put them in a closet or even a bin or something, and put some heat there so that they stay warm. You can put a little pan of water in to keep the humidity up a little bit, but you don't. Some people have been putting them in plastic bags, and that doesn't work. They just rot. But they will keep well if they're cured properly, just at room temperature. Let's see what else. Well, there's a whole bunch of other stuff I can get into, but anyway, the varieties I've got back there, there's some white ones, white flashed, which in a lot of spots where they're eating a lot of sweet potatoes, they tend to be white flashed rather than the orange ones. They're not as overpoweringly sweet and not as moist. They're a drier sweet potato. And then there's some purple ones and some various ones of orange ones as well. There's a book that Ken Allen out of Kingston wrote. It's called Sweet Potatoes for the Home Gardener. It's about one of the only books that was done on sweet potatoes for the home garden. It's got a lot of good information, but it's very hard to find right now. He passed away years ago now. And I guess, well, that's probably pretty good, I guess, for the time.
So you have this set up at the Gelert farm? The sweet potato setup?
Well, I have it at the sweet potatoes I grow at my parents' on Crystal Lake Road.
Okay, is there any a possibility of coming see the setup?
Yeah,
in person and how you do it? This would be for you, because I'm like a visual guy, so see how people set it all up and that, or take pictures or something like that, and you can share it to see.
There's some pictures on the website. It's it's on the information sheet there.
Okay.
And there's some pictures of the sweet potatoes, the rows and stuff, and planting them and stuff.
Okay.
And I can vouch for the fact that they grow really well in buckets. I've done it probably for many years now, right?
Yeah, fair
probably
fee.
getting on 10 years. Yeah.
How much do you have to water them if they're in a bucket? Like, do they need to be kept really moist or just?
You want to water, especially when you first plant them. You want to keep the water to them because they're semi-tropical. They'll do a lot better with the water. They'll survive. I had this spring I didn't have time to clear out my trays of sweet potatoes I was using to grow the slips last year. There was still slips in there that were viable, and I hadn't watered them since probably the 1st of June last year, and that was in March, and they're in the basement in the dark.
So you can sustain it, so you can just get your next ones for the next year, so it's a sustained, like you control the whole life cycle.
Yeah. When you're harvesting, you can keep back the small ones and grow slips off them. You want to make sure, because they will mutate a bit, so you want to select your best plants that have the proper shape and characteristics of that type, and keep so when they got lots of big roots, they usually don't have very many small ones that are usable. But if you get a few of them, keep those and use them for the start. Your ones next year. You can dig for miles with sweet potatoes, especially a couple kinds. Those ones I recommend highly putting in containers, because it's a lot easier to dump them out than follow root and dig like 3-4 feet away trying to find the sweet potatoes. Most of them will concentrate under the sweet potato plant, but.
And so that's the buckets you use, are just your standard 19-liter.
I use tree buckets. You know those that you buy trees in? Those big, but they got handles on them. They're
the bigger ones.
This round. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. They were in that garden picture. I don't know if you probably didn't notice, but yeah.
That's what you use for the.
Like a half barrel will work. You can put 3 or 4 plants in that.
Yeah, I put 3 in those big ones.
And how many sweet potatoes do you get?
You're using the term slips. I'm not familiar with that.
Okay, so
Potato eyes, is that basically the same thing?
well, your potatoes,
right? Yeah.
your potatoes are
They have eyes.
they have eyes, but they're not sweet potatoes.
And they
No,
totally
no.
keep in the closet.
And so with a sweet potato, is it kind of an eye that you're working from, or?
Yes, but not really. They'll put usually it's on the one end of the sweet potato that they'll send out the slips, more so than the whole potato. So they'll send up the slip, and then you pull it off and root it, and
That's what you plant.
yeah, and that's what you plant, because otherwise you'd have 20, 25, 30 plants sometimes on one sweet potato, so you just have a ton of vines.
Okay.
The other thing I was going to mention that I forgot is because of the sweet potatoes being able to be eaten, the whole plant, you can utilize it as livestock food as well. So before you harvest it, before you get frost, you can cut the tops off all the plants. You can take that vine and feed it to pigs, cattle, whatever. You can make a silage out of it. Another thing that was kind of interesting is some of the Caribbean countries have done some research on it, and livestock fed with the sweet potato vine, whether it was silage or fresh, produced less methane. So that's kind of interesting. But there is some sweet potatoes too. Some plants that are bred specifically for the leaves for salads and stuff. as well as the decorative ones that you see too are sweet potatoes as well. And they will have sweet potatoes under the plant. Just I wouldn't recommend eating them from a nursery because who knows what they've been treated with.
Do they flower, Lee?
Yeah, they flower. Some of them will flower more so than others. And then it looks, because they're a member of the Morning Glory family, it looks like Morning Glories.
So you just leave them, don't pick them off, just let them flower and then
You can eat the flowers if you want.
Okay.
They will, if they have long enough, they will form a little seed pod.
Yeah.
There's 4 hard little seeds in there. I very seldom see that, but I guess if you keep them in a greenhouse, they will do that. Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah.